The title I've given the exhibition is That Which Remains. It refers to various sources of influence and inspiration for me. And there are three significant influences that have been crucial in shaping me and shaping my work. And that's what I'd like to tell you about today. And I hope that you'll be able to see the interrelatedness of those three influences. The first major influence, or the first major formative influence, I guess, dates back to my undergraduate years at Northwestern. I was an anthropology and a studio art major. And the summer after my sophomore year, I participated in an archaeological excavation in southern Illinois. The crew of students went down to southern Illinois. We studied with Dr. Stuart Strever, who's a very famous archaeologist. He had discovered evidence of habitation in a farmer's field dating back to prehistoric times, 9,000 years ago in Illinois. We dug through, I'm going to point out it was the New York Times that published the article. We dug through layers and layers of earth deposited over centuries by silt from the Illinois River. We uncovered artifacts, tools, beads, the bones of 5 domesticated dogs, which proved to be the earliest evidence of domesticated dogs in the Americas. And we even found a baby burial, making the Coster site the oldest known cemetery site in eastern North America. Since that particular location was in the Illinois River Valley, layers of dirt and silt over those centuries would wash over the area and cover the habitations of the different populations that would live there. It was a geographical layering process. Each one of these they're called horizons, but they're named separately, numbered, because they're different times and different populations. We carefully excavated on a grid pattern, and we placed shovelfuls of dirt on screen meshes and sifted out the artifacts. We took copious notes, plotting each location where a bone or a tool or even plant seeds were found. So basically we were discovering and recording that which remained, which was my title. I'm inserting this slide because I want you to note the similarities between this one and this one. Because in my mind, this is the interrelatedness that comes into my love of books and paper. This is an overhead view of the Coster site where we were digging, and you can see we plotted things out in squares, and some of them, which might have had interesting artifacts, we dug deeper to see what else we might have found in there. I'm in that picture, but I'm not going to tell you. They were able to solve many of the mysteries about these earliest Americans. In other words, they could decipher what those people had eaten, how their tools were made and used, what diseases plagued them, and how they built their homes. We also got up before sunrise to dig before the weather got hot. We lived in a town of abandoned houses, run down, that only had outhouses and a pump in the backyard because there was no running water and we were able to take showers once a week at our local grade school. That's high impact learning. When I was applying to graduate school, I had to decide whether I wanted to study anthropology or art. There were no higher learning institutions at that time that let you have an interdisciplinary focus. I vividly recall standing in front of a poster in the hallway of the art department, much like the VAC here, and deciding right then and there I was going to choose art. As much as I enjoyed lifting up the layers of earth, finding objects that people had made, and wondering whose baby that skeleton was, or who wore those clay beads that I had dug up, I wanted to be the person making objects and putting meaning into them. My parents' living room was lined with bookcases filled with gorgeous books. Gold stamping, gold edges. One of my clearest memories of my dad is sitting in his chair with a book in his hand. And when I was in grade school, I didn't just make book reports. I was a nerd, so I made books out of the book reports. And I decorated them with elementary school flair, crumpled up tin foil, you know, it was weird. But, and as a child, my favorite game was Scrabble. And little did I realize that was my first efforts at typesetting, putting letters together. This is a real minute and a half explaining what letterpress printing is. So it doesn't really matter if you can't hear it, just watch it. This is one of the printing presses. These are not the ones at the Art Institute, but it was the shortest video I could find.
The printing press is technology, it's an analog technology that a lot of people are still interested in. This particular letterpress was made in 1951. The first thing you do is set the type and the spacing, and you center it on the press bed, and you proof your type for spelling errors, spacing, and any adjustments you'd like to see, and you lock it up. Of course, you select your ink color as well, and then you load your paper in, register it, and make sure that your type is centered on the page. Turn the machine on, slide the paper beneath the gripper pins by stepping on the foot pedal. And then you crank your papers through, and it rolls over the type and print it.
So it transfers the inked impression to the paper. Its historic forerunner is this method of letterpress printing. A German jewelry maker by the name of Johann Gutenberg in 1453 about brought together a myriad of inventions to make letterpress viable. First, he converted a press that was used to squeeze grapes into wine, and he made it work for the type. He carved and cast small alphabet characters out of metal to make individual pieces of type. So Gutenberg figured out if he made these movable, separate, they could be assembled together to make words, to make sentences, paragraphs, pages in books, and print them. He also composed an ink that would lay on the type, but when you put a piece of paper on top of it and added pressure, the ink would release and transfer the impression. And he also took advantage of the handmade paper that was just coming into Europe in that century. He printed some of his work on the skins of goats and lambs, but the longest lasting pieces were on paper because it was 100% cellulose fiber. Movable type was already in use in East Asia. Gutenberg's invention of the printing press enabled a much faster rate of printing. It quickly spread across the world, and it led to an information revolution. The desire for literacy, everything had been a spoken word except for the monks in the scriptoria doing manuscripts. It also led to the founding of universities because people wanted to learn how to read, and the spread of literature, both that of the ancients, the Greeks, the Romans. It was all becoming available. So it had a profound effect on ushering in the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment. This is how Gutenberg and currently we keep track of all of the metal letters. And I've brought a small version of a typecase up here so you can glance at that letter. Each of these cubby holes is attributed to a specific letter of the alphabet: lowercase, uppercase, numbers, punctuation, spacing. And they're heavy, very heavy. This is a close-up of some larger type so that you can see the character, the type character carved or cast onto the one end of the piece of type. So basically you are selecting all of these letters, you're spelling them together to make your word. You have to pick up a piece of metal for a space in between your words, and then you can go on to the next word. It's requiring a lot of patience. And surprisingly, the students at the School of the Art Institute are eager to go back to learning patience. Instead of just the digital, if I ask on the first day of class, why are you here? The answer is, I'm tired of looking at the screen. I want to hold something in my human hands. I want to mix the ink and smell it. I want to touch the paper. And this is letting them do that. This is a page from Gutenberg's masterpiece, the Gutenberg Bible, 42-line Bible. He set all of this type. This is called a justified column when it's absolutely even on both sides, which is difficult to make your spacing work like that. There's a page of the Gutenberg Bible in the Harold Washington Library Special Collections downtown. Take my students there to see it. And if they put white gloves on, they're able to hold something that is like almost 600 years old. And it's impeccably done. You gotta remember, he invented this. He was a beginner, and this is like the best printing I've ever seen. You hold that page up to the light, and the type on one side is exactly matched baseline to the type on the other side. That's not easy to do. This is 2 shots of the inside of the studio at the Art Institute. I've taught there for more than 40 years. Letterpress is such a slow, deliberate process of accumulation, meaning you are doing it. Letterpress also makes an impression into the paper. It's not like digital that just skates across the top like ice skating on a rink. It goes deep. And that's another archaeological interrelatedness. A fossil embedded in stone is similar. these two real short little videos are trying to demonstrate the correct way to print, and the next one will be the incorrect way to print. You always can learn from looking at stuff that doesn't work. And I think Martha, who's right over there, my colleague at the Art Institute, she shot these while I'm fiddling with the process. So this is the correct way. The press is inked up. If you can see, there's a piece of big wood type, a letter H, in the bed. And here's a piece of paper. And we're going to feed that paper in and roll it over. Well, first we're going to ink the type with one roll. Let me show you. So it's not red now. It'll be red after this roll. And now we put the piece of paper in, and we roll it again, and this ink, because there's pressure, will be transferred to the paper. Aren't these beautiful sounds? They're just the sounds of letterpress. No, did we even show them that? I guess we didn't. Did you see that? Okay. Okay, incorrect manner. And what I mean by that is sometimes the students would forget to put a piece of paper in here. And they would just roll. And so they end up printing on what we call the packing, which is just the wrapping so that you can get that punch of letterpress. And the difficulty, or the bad thing about that, is if it prints on the packing, then when you put the next piece of paper in, you've got ink on the back side. And if you're doing a page in a book, you don't want that on the back side. Individual alphabet mixed media drawings back there. I used that packing that the students made, and they shouldn't have. I mean, they shouldn't have, because I have to replace that packing, and it's expensive, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, that's what I used for Strata. I salvaged the packing because I viewed them as layouts of beauty, and then I revived them as cropped compositions. For the book, I did not add any other marks on the pages. In the drawing series, yes, I did. I challenged myself to add marks that would enhance what I thought the cropped selections using the shapes and the spaces of the alphabet characters. And I view both of these pieces as an archaeological collaboration with my students of the past. So page upon page of this book is layer upon layer, layers of deposit. In errors, we learn. Mistakes teach. I always saw the beauty and the possibility in these efforts, and so I wanted to make the book to commemorate that. I wanted it thick. I've taught a long time. I wanted it thick, and I wanted it thick because the Coster excavation was really thick. And if you walk over there and page through it, you can probably still smell the scent of printer's ink. It's going to be there for a long time. Strata is fastened with a variation on what's called a Coptic stitch. Rows of sequential knots that hold each of the folded pages, which we call signatures, together. The Coptic stitch was developed in the 2nd century AD by Christians in Egypt. So it too is an old method. Coptic stitch characterized by its exposed spine. Most books, you know what the spine is. It's got the name of the book on it. But this is open. And that is part of what allows the book to open completely flat, which lets you see the entirety of the spreads. Just as we analyzed the seeds and the artifacts we found in the soil of Campsville to learn what those people ate or made or held sacred, the snippets of words and phrases that you see on the pages are a historical record of what my students were thinking and doing during all those years of my teaching. This is what they felt compelled to put into print. And I think it's an extremely interesting archive. I wish that I had dated them as I saved them, so I'd have a chronological sense of how the students' psyches changed over those decades. What words were different, what thoughts were different. But I didn't. So nonetheless, it just exists as a historical document of that time, just like the layers of silt of the Illinois River capturing the document of the population living in southern Illinois. This is a quote that I really respond to. Found it a long time ago. Litera scripta mene. Translated, it means the written word remains. And it was attributed to Horace, again, an old thing. I like it because it speaks of a quiet pride in the weight and dignity of the written text, and especially in the permanence of printing. The spoken word depends on oral transmission for its survival, and it can disappear, it can change. But with the written word, the page itself is a tangible thing, one that occupies a lasting place in the world, a distinct niche in space and time, and a home on one's bookshelf. It highlights that while spoken words may be forgotten, written words have a lasting impact and provide a fixed record. Certainly that quote speaks to the significance of letterpress, but I find it also underscores the third aspect that shapes my practice. I'm a poet and author, as well as a visual artist. I love words, language, anything old, which you've guessed by now. Like the English alphabet, roughly 400 years old, like letterpress, not quite 600 years old. I have kept journals pretty much all my life, which become layers upon layers of memories. These journals chronicle my everyday observations, relationships, hopes, dreams, and frustrations as well. That's just the top view. It's one of those deep Tupperware things. There's only 3, so don't worry. Writing a poem often inspires a visual artwork to be made. And this is the case with both the Vestige series of letterpress prints and the handmade book that's tucked into the alcove in the back. The poem in the first of the succession is what inspired all of the rest of the images. And this is the poem. I can see you only with my eyes closed. a blank slate, and then you appear as faint as the remnants of writing ghosted on the history of an old-fashioned chalkboard. When I asked Francesca to take pictures of the chalkboard images, she said to me, "We need to label these, Cath, in a manner that's more explicit than number 1, number 2, number 3. So it was Francesca that really forced me to think intensely about what emotions were hidden deep in that poem. That chalkboard history, the layers of my life that inspired the poem. And for that, I'm ever grateful. One of the motivations to make letterpress prints out of the chalkboard images was the contradiction, the irony, and the beauty between the media and the concept. Letterpress lasts. The chalk on a chalkboard does not last. It's erased, often immediately. Could I make a lasting image of something so ephemeral? That was my challenge, and you're the judge of that. Okay, and finally a few words about the book in the alcove. But first I'm going to tell you about the cover of that book. It is covered with what we call hand-marbled paper. The title of the book is You Left. And the poem was written for my sister-in-law, Rhonda. The cover paper, the marbling, is a process called decorating paper that originated in the 12th century in Japan and the 15th century in the Islamic world. It's a method of floating oil-based paints and kind of combing them into patterns, and then laying a piece of paper on top, and that ink grabs to the paper and you pull it off and you have transferred it. So it's another printing process. And you can get patterns that are similar to marble, like granite, or I kind of think of it more as currents in water. Try and not just hear me, but try and watch what happens to the text across the page. You left the green beans on the kitchen counter, waiting for their ends to be snapped off. Slipped into the steam, circling in wreaths upward in the empty room. You left the chicken marinating in the refrigerator, swimming in spices. An iridescent pool, like the wake of the boat on the Mississippi waterway in which you were riding. You left bowls of water and food for the feral cats perched on the porch railing, eclipsed by the sun, setting in. Darkness, now stalking in. You left us hungry. Hungry for more. More of you. Not enough of you. You left too soon. You left on the passing of Rhonda, June 3rd, 2017. And I did it to honor the radiance and the last voyage of a dear sister-in-law. I wanted a long horizontal book because it speaks of Rhonda's field of vision during the passage she was taking on the boat down the river. And it gives the reader time and space to accompany her. I wanted the text blocks, the type, the words, to gradually slide across the page just as she was traveling. I wanted a paper that was lightweight, so as the reader turned the page, they cascaded across your hands like waves of water. I wanted an italic typeface so that its slanted posture had the rhythmic motion of the buoyancy of a boat on water. I wanted the wide expanse of the waterway to be reflected in the abundance of negative space on each page. And it's fastened with a chain stitch that mimics the repetition of waves from the wake of the boat as it goes through the water. And finally, I wanted the words towards the last page to fall down because Rhonda dies on that boat. Time creates history. History creates memories. Memories document life. And life nourishes art, which is that which remains. Questions or any comments or?
I said that was amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. Lynn?
Kim, in your work, you've always used gold and silver. It has been in most of the work, actually. Is there a reason why you choose gold and silver?
It's mostly silver. I did go to gold here. Ms. Rhonda had such a radiant personality. It just was sparkling. And that's why the paper, marbled paper, has the gold flecks, and that's why I continued it here. But as for the silver, I think silver is, it's humble next to gold. Gold's flashy. Gold gets all the credit, you know. But I like silver. And there's a humbleness, a meekness to it, but it's so sensitive. It's a beauty. It has beauty too.
That's no comment. I really enjoy how intentional your work is.
Oh, thank you.
That's one of my favorite things.
Thank you very much. Jemima?
Yeah.
Stand up so
I can hear you. I just wanted to say I love also how intentional and attention to detail you work with your work, especially the one with the poem in the book about how you wanted to choose lightweight paper to give the resemblance of water and how it flows. I just thought that was very nice.
thank you. In my class, any of my classes, you're going to encounter me asking you why. And I think it's important for you to be able to answer that. Why? Thank you.
We talked a little bit about this before, but when you're thinking about a book, because I think that these are all really good, interesting examples of books, what makes a book in your opinion? Like, how does it qualify? I mean, is there anything that qualifies it as a book as opposed to not being a book? Because I think that's something that I enjoyed when I walked through probably the second or third time I realized that there were more books in here than I thought.
I mean, that's the question that's been up for debate in bookmaking, art making circles for couple of decades now. And I like to envision as broad an interpretation as possible. I think it should have some sense of revealing a content that has reference to its structure and perhaps its covers or fastening method. But it can be boxed, it can be hung from the ceiling, it can be, I mean, you are reading it in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a narrative in sequence. It can be separate pages. I could have arranged those in a different way, but you know, my head guess is more traditional, so I did arrange them in a way that I thought was a bit more serial, sequential. But
That was kind of a surprise one for me because, like I say, I've been through the show about twice, but had a group that we were sitting and talking about it. And then I came back in, I think when I saw Colophon at the end, when I realized that this was a book, because originally I was seeing it as a series of, obviously related, it was just a body of work as opposed to it being. But then I think that immediately snapped it into being a book, and that was an interesting sort of experience to have. It. Thinking of this as obviously being a book, and the one in the corner obviously being a book, and recognizing the other two books in here as sort of being more exploded books as opposed to.
yeah, I mean, because this one is basically stretched out and wall, and you can't handle it, you think of it as individual entities. But you know, I'm thinking eventually, when I have time, I might craft some kind of box for it that, you know, maybe has a slate top on it and a wood frame or something, and really bring it not just to closure but to a wholeness. Yes, dang,
I'm here. This is such a reflective body of work, and while you were creating it, were you making any connections to what you were talking about in terms of, I mean, memories? They go up, they go down. In terms of emotion and reflecting back upon them, did you make any connections with the water metaphor that you were making with the book? And did you, throughout the experience, have to stop at any point and be like, I need a break from this, it's getting a little too heavy, or were those the times where you hit the gas and couldn't stop, or both?
Well, to answer the second one first, I worked on these all at the same time, and when I hit an impasse in one, I went to the other. But in my mind, as soon as I recognized the archaeology was really my life, and a book is really the pages of my life, then I what's the word, catapulted, just went from there. And I didn't have enough time to do everything I wanted, because it made sense at that point. I mean, I had to learn the Coptic stitch, and there's a zillion mistakes in that binding. But, you know, it's my first attempt, and it sits there happy. It's you know, it's there, and it's not just up here anymore, it's there.
Like you said, having reasons behind everything you do. In terms of your process, do you kind of start with the idea and then you kind of go to make stuff that then kind of tries to fulfill the idea, or is there, I guess, or does unintentionality work its way into your process that you then have to somehow kind of incorporate into the intentional part of it? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Well, I'll try and answer what I think you asked, and that is that for this, in the Rhonda book, I wrote those poems years before I ever imagined them as a book. You know, I tucked them away, and they'd nag at me. You know, the poem, I would, not very often, but every now and then I'd go back and read some old poems, and I knew I wanted to commemorate Rhonda, so I knew I wanted to do something else than just write a poem. But I had no idea when I wrote it that would be a book. And I can't remember when it occurred to me to make it into a book. This one, The Chalkboard Vestige, Frankie and I have worked on that for years. I mean, we could probably go back to 2021 or 2022. Frankie, I have this idea, and she talked to me, and then months would go by because I just couldn't get back at it. And I've never done, these required what we call a photopolymer plate. Instead of the little pieces of type, technology has advanced in letterpress so that you can take a photograph and expose it on a piece of polymer plastic, and then you can take that plate and put it in the press just like you put the type in it, and you can print it. And so the real challenge here was I'm not very good at technology, so I needed help. But also, the images I wanted are almost gone. I wanted them almost gone. And when you print something, you usually want it, so you can see it. And that's part of our battle that we had. I had to really depend, Martha helped me kind of figuring out halftone stuff, but then I felt I was superimposing on her too much, so I contacted a commercial printer who happened to just be a kindred spirit and understood that this was super important to me and how could we make it happen. And so she took Frankie's photos and translated them into a digital file and then made the polymer plates. And then I was left with how do I print something that is almost gone, which, you know, wasn't easy, but that's the kind of thing I liked, to try and do something that I hadn't done, so. Does that answer it now?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, James.
I'm gonna try and not start every sentence with thank you, but thank you for sharing this with us. It means a lot. But also thank you for how you presented it. I think for those of us, and I speak entirely for myself here, who stagger around in this space between graphic design and fine art, especially in the environment that we were raised in, this very digital amalgamation of techniques that constitute graphic design or constitute art. By taking us back historically into the archaeological dig and setting the tone there, by talking about the printing press, I think you introduced me to Mallarmé and like the earliest versions of graphic design. I think his typography arranged as water, truly this feels very similar and beautifully echoes that. And I in 100 different ways. I think for designers watching it, there's like little things that must go off in our heads that say, oh, this is where this is. But I think it's so important for students to feel like it doesn't all fall into one of these two buckets, and that there's celebration of typography that extends far beyond graphic design. There's celebration of paper and context and texture that goes way beyond fine art, and I think you blend those so beautifully here.
Thank you.
So
But
thankful.
You said it very, very well. You should have been up there.
I sat in enough of your classes,
Yeah.
but I think that the pieces that are here are so inspiring to a group of designers who are heading into very unsure waters as to what graphic design means and what fine art means now, and everything's about to change, and we know that. And so carrying these lessons of the past is the way that we make the new make sense.
Absolutely. You know, you can look to the past and you don't imitate it, but you take the essence of what's possible or what's beautiful from it, and then you bring it into your own voice, and you've created something brand new, you know, and innovative. And I'm also really grateful that you said that what I said speaks to designers as well as studio artists, because I teach this letterpress in the visual communication design department. I don't teach it in printmaking. So accolades to the Art Institute for acknowledging that design, graphic design, is integrated into studio art. And Nathan and I have fought for that for all our lives, or that we've known each other. That's why the VAC exists as it does. That's why our programming tries to have analog as well as digital classes. The blending of that, I think, is one of the ways that the future could really have potential. It's not just the way for letterpress to stay alive, but it's also, Nathan's been working with jelly prints, which are basically a relief print, basically exactly what I've been talking about. And you should see how excited he gets, you know, it's wonderful. But it's also going all the way back to Albert Dürer and transferring an image, which maybe will encourage some of you to take printmaking classes.